much for having me, everyone, and your interest in this topic. As Lori mentioned, I work with ReFED. We are a national nonprofit, and we are entirely dedicated to reducing the amount of food that goes to waste around the country. We focus on doing that through providing data and insights on the topic, by helping to catalyze more capital and innovation, and by acting as a hub and connector to engage stakeholders. So why are we after this? Well, in the biggest of pictures, the UN predicts that we will need about 50% more food by 2050 than we had in 2010. Yet at the same time, a recent report from Stanford showed that agricultural productivity has already declined about 21% from what it would have been without climate change. And we're expecting those impacts to be even more detrimental in the future. At the same time, about 1/3 of all the food that is produced is not being eaten. That is $1 trillion worth of food and about 8% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, if food waste were a country, it would be the 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world, emitting more than the entire aviation industry. Here in the US, it's about 38% of our food supply, 240 million tons of food, and just a very small, what we call food surplus. So that's food that is uneaten and unsold, and just a very small proportion of that is being donated. The vast majority is going to landfills, incineration, and other places like that. That's over $440 billion worth of food. That's about 2% of the US GDP. And of course, it takes a huge amount of resources to produce all that food that we're ultimately not using. An area of land the size of California and New York, as much water as California, New York, and Texas use combined. And to add insult to injury, food is actually the #1 product that is entering our landfills today. And when there, it creates a lot of methane. Landfills are about the 3rd largest source of methane in the country, and food is one of the top sources of methane in landfills. Gosh, I'm not sure if this is showing quite right, but when it comes to greenhouse gases, surplus food was responsible for 6% of US greenhouse gases. That's equivalent to over 80 million cars worth. And the vast majority of that is coming from what it takes to grow and produce food. So despite the fact that methane, it is a top source of methane, that is actually only 6%. That disposal component is only 6% of why food waste has such a big climate footprint. The real majority comes from everything it takes to grow, transport, store, cool, cook food and get it to our tables, as well as the land use and land pressures that it takes. So a lot of land is being converted to agriculture, and that's happening, in the Amazon, but it's also happening right here in the US. In fact, we had just between 2018 and 2019, an area the size of Yellowstone National Park was converted from native grasslands to agriculture. So really trying to use all the food we have to take down that demand is what we're after. Now we estimate that we've done a whole analysis where we've analyzed 42 different solutions to food waste within the US. And we estimate that an $18 billion investment annually would return a positive return net of about $74 billion. In addition to that, it could return a huge number of resource and social benefits. So 6 trillion gallons of water, enough to provide New York water for 16 years, 24 million cars worth of greenhouse gases, 4 billion meals for people in need, and about 60,000 jobs. And I should point out that the majority, because this is a climate discussion here, in fact, the majority of the footprint, that is the benefit, really comes from the prevention solutions. So while only 41% of the tons comes from solutions that are really about not having too much extra food in the first place. 83% of the greenhouse gas benefit comes from that. And that is because those are the solutions that really start to take down our overall demand for food. So as I mentioned, we have done a whole analysis, and we invite you after this webinar to come and check out the tools we have available. These are all available at insights.refed.org, and we call it our ReFED Insights Engine. We have 6 different tools. I'll give you a little view of a couple of them here, but just know that there's actually more on there, and you can click around and play to your heart's delight. So to mention one of them, we have the ReFED Capital Tracker. This tracks investment in the space. Right now we have private investment only. We hope to add philanthropic and public funding later on this year and in the future. But we estimate that over the last 11 years, almost $10 billion worth of investment has been made into this space, including 500 million year to date. And we are seeing, you know, it's not a straight trend line, but we are certainly seeing an increase overall. And so this is one of our tools, the Capital Tracker, and you can play around, and it actually goes on to, you know, you can look at investments by the individual and see who the investors are, and there's a lot of searchability on it as well. Another tool we have is our solutions analysis. We have, as I mentioned, analyzed 42 different solutions to food waste. And you can get on there and play around. You know, you can filter by if you care about net financials, by climate, by who you are. So there's a lot of, again, kind of clickability. You can click into each and see a fact sheet. When it comes to climate, some of the top solutions are really consumer based. But as you look into certain, and that's kind of food system wide, but as you look into certain sectors, you start to see some of those prevention solutions come to the top. Optimizing lines in manufacturing, tracking waste in food service are certainly 2 strong ones. And markdown alert applications is right here, and that is what we're going to hear about in just a moment. I just want to mention we have about 1,500 solution providers in a directory on that site. So if you're interested in a particular type of solution, you can search for that and find both nonprofit and for-profit organizations that are providing those solutions. Oh goodness, this doesn't look like it's going to load quite quick enough, but it's just sort of to demonstrate that there is a huge variety of innovation happening in a lot of different spaces. And it's just a really exciting space to be in, and maybe Arthur can speak to that as we go forward. And there's not just the solutions that we have modeled. As I mentioned, we've modeled 42. I know you can't read all the small print on here, but we've identified 31 more that we haven't been able to model yet, and we know there are best practices and lots of innovation happening beyond that. If you want to kind of stay engaged with what we're finding, we have something we call the Food Waste Funders Circle. We have about 150 investors and foundations that are part of that. And what we do is we provide networking and education opportunities, but we also circulate every month a report, 2 reports really, one with funding opportunities in the investment space and one with grant funding opportunities in the philanthropic space.